And I think Neal's okay with recording. Is that okay? You love
Yeah.
being on camera, right? You like being on this side of it?
Yes, that's why I started handling a camera in the first place. I was hoping somebody would just turn it around.
Okay, so just to introduce you to everyone. This is Neal Hutcheson. He's a video producer, um, video and filmmaker at he works at NC State, North Carolina State University for the Language and Life Project. Um, he is he doesn't like to talk about it, but he's an award-winning filmmaker. He's got 3 Emmys, and one for The Last One, which is a film that hopefully those of you who are logged in have already seen. Also for a documentary called Cherokee about the Cherokee language in Western North Carolina and how they're trying to revive that. And then Talking Black in America, which won an Emmy this last year in 2020. Um, and anyway, so he's also a great friend of mine. We worked together. If it wasn't for him, the Land and Water Revisited film that you made would not have happened. And anyway, thanks for coming, Neal. Thanks for logging in, taking the time.
Yeah, thank you.
Um, so first off, I just want to say, can I think it's kind of odd that, you have a position at a university as a filmmaker. Um, if you're not in the film department, you're not, it's kind of a different thing. Can you kind of explain your position a little bit? What you do at NC State?
It is a unique position. Basically, I work with a linguist who has always advocated for outreach and public education, so that his discipline didn't become insular. It didn't become just academics speaking to academics and competing with each other, but it was his feeling was that if this isn't information isn't useful to everyone, then what good is it? And so he always had a deep interest in doing innovative work, much like actually like Kirk does. The two have a good rapport, in fact, um, because they have a similar feeling about that. And so where I come in was he way back when he was looking for somebody to help him do some video materials that were geared towards a public audience. And in fact, I'm still doing that. We've gotten better and more sophisticated at what we do, and we've gotten more ambitious along the way. But that's still what we're doing.
Yeah, I love that you said that because um and I think that's why one of the things that attracted you and I with each other was this idea that Walt has of academics needing to share this information. It's not just it's not just a good thing to do, it's the right thing to do. I probably have brought this up to the class in a lecture. You know I feel like that a lot of the problems that we're in now, especially in the United States but globally, level of misinformation, people not trusting facts and not trusting science, it really has to do with that we are to blame. The academics are to blame. We've done such a poor job of explaining how this all works to the public because all we mainly do is write papers and that our other academic colleagues read, and it's written in a way in which the public can't really digest it. So making films and doing things for the public is extremely important. But you do this stuff for NC State, but you also manage to find, I mean, that's your full-time job. That's your job, right? But then you find a way to do a lot of your own stuff, right? How do
Yeah.
you balance that?
Well, I've been really fortunate in my work providing a base, you know, stability and income, and as well as being able to choose some of my own projects. And if not choosing the, project exactly, but at least having a creative role in them. But along the way, there were other projects I wanted to do, and it wasn't my inclination to only produce, within the institution. So I wanted to do some things where I was free of any obligation that it would be, the projects would be successful, and so I could take a few more risks, I guess. And so I started doing some work on the side, and basically I've always kept it going, and it's taken a lot of work, but it also I mean, because there's only so many hours in the day, and I do like to catch a few hours of rest. Uh, it takes a long time for me to complete things. But now that I've been at it for a few years, I've got it. I've at least been able to finish a few projects.
Yeah, a few wonderful projects, no doubt. In my opinion. Um, so to back up just a bit, talking about your position at NC State and stuff like that, but how, give us a little bit of background, like your education, how you got into filmmaking. Was it something that, when you were in high school and stuff, you were like, yeah, I'm going to be a filmmaker. That's what I'm going to do. Or did it something you stumbled into?
Well, I kind of remembered later that I did have an interest early on that I had forgotten about when I read a biography of the Doors called "No One Here Gets Out Alive," and Jim Morrison went to film school,
Oh,
and
right,
right then I
right.
decided that's that's for me. I don't know, what it was, but I kind of lost track of that, and I got interested in anthropology, and that was where I really found my direction, I guess. But then I just kind of came into it sideways, really. Like my roommate was making films. I was kind of at that particular age needing something, for self-expression and for like uh I don't know, just like
So your age, meaning like while you were an undergrad, is that what you mean?
yeah, yeah, it was a pretty intense period of time, and I didn't have any discipline. I had artistic leanings, but I didn't have any discipline in any, particular area. So I kind of fell into it in an experimental mode, like making like I don't know, just weird films, and uh, I really got taken with that. And then I went to NC State because they had a film program they were starting up, and so I went to NC State and I studied film there, and I planned to go on to film school, and I started getting work, making educational films, and I decided, and some commercial work, which pays well coming out of school. So I just decided, I don't really want to do more school. I want to make things, and I want to learn by doing. So
Yeah.
that's kind of how I got started.
And you said so. You started out at you didn't say this, but at Appalachian State University out in Western North Carolina, or kind of central. But is that where you took anthropology classes? I'm just curious.
Yeah,
I don't think I've ever asked you that before. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Um, well, this kind of feeds. I'm just kind of, I wanted this to only last about 30 or 40 minutes or so. But there's some of the stuff that you've said. Well, I'm sorry. Some of the questions I had written started overlapping with some of the questions that some students had submitted early. We sent a Google form out, and quite a few students put some of those down. Of course, they're on my desktop here. So one of the questions was talking about getting into the last one. Um, that was not your first documentary, but it's definitely been one of your most successful in the sense that it's got this kind of definitely got a cult following to it. Um, but how did the making of the last one come about? So this kind of piggybacks on one of the questions that came in. Like the main thing that several of the students asked was they were curious about, in the lecture that I gave on moonshine that they watched just a couple of days ago, I talked about how, this is a very, intimate scene out there, with this type of illegal and illicit production of whatever it is, right? I mean, anywhere in the world, these kind of intimate economies that exist. But taking to outsiders is not something that the people of Western North Carolina are necessarily big on, especially if they are doing something that it's illegal. You just don't trust people. So a lot of the students were asking, like, how the hell did he just kind of get involved with somebody like Popcorn and gain his trust? So if you could want to elaborate on how that all unfolded.
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I think you and I have similar sensibilities in the way that we approach communities, and it's you approach them willing to listen and learn, not coming there to tell them who they are, and it So I think that that disposition is the way to start, and if you don't have that, then you don't get anywhere. But it also took time, and I met Popcorn Sutton when I was making a film called Mountain Talk, which was filmed in Western North Carolina or Southern Appalachia, and it was about Appalachian dialect, but it was also, you know, about culture. Language is culture, and it's an expression of culture. So it's really was using language as an access point into the larger culture. And by Southern Appalachian culture, I'm really talking about that most traditional aspect of it that is most closely identified with the culture, which is um, mainly poor white people, the culture of poor white people. Just whatever you think of as Appalachian is typically coming from that,
Hmm.
you know, milieu. And anyway, so I spent time and I made this film, and it was a film where I was very conscientiously trying to disenfranchise myself of the in the voice of the film and pay attention to what people told me and what the materials I'd gathered, the interviews I'd gathered, and in a sense give the voice over. Of course, anything you do is always subjective. It's always going to have your own imprint on it, but I tried to give it over to the voice of the people, and I feel like I was at least partly successful in that, and was rewarded by that, by their reaction. They were so pleased. You're dealing with a community of people who are stigmatized. They've been looked down upon and mischaracterized for so long, um, by the outside world. They're accustomed to it, and to see themselves represented in the way that they see themselves, I think, was very powerful, much more than I anticipated. I felt like I was just doing due diligence to the project, but it was more powerful with them than I anticipated. In fact, as an example, and this isn't a boast about my work, it's a boast about just that anybody who handles the material in that way. That a woman who had terminal brain cancer called me on the phone and made me promise that I would never stop doing this work. So, when you get that kind of reaction, you obviously have done something right. Um,
Yeah. Wow.
yeah, I don't think I ever told you that, Kirk.
No, I would remember that. That's something that would stick. Wow. That's
So, I think that that complete and Popcorn had participated and helped me with that project. He had been involved in that. So I think seeing the finished version, um, having been up there personally, and I was also not filming with a crew. I was working by myself.
yeah.
And so I think that makes a big difference too, if you're not rolling in kind of with importing your own cultural bubble or whatever, and you're allowing them to see you and be transparent and be outnumbered,
Hmm.
um, at all times. I think that that was a big step. I think that was part of earning their trust. And then I think when they saw the finished, that first documentary, they felt like, here's somebody they could relate to, who was actually paying attention to them.
Yeah.
Um,
That you weren't taking advantage of them or trying to, I don't know, manipulate their image in any way. That's no doubt one of the reasons I liked the film at the very beginning was I felt like it didn't really focus on those stereotypes. I mean, yes, those stereotypes were there because they're real, they exist, but it wasn't just about that. It wasn't about amplifying those stereotypes, and poking fun at, which we see a lot. And then this small crew thing, or crew of one, no doubt plays a role. I mean, with what we did in Mexico, the fact that there was just three of us, I still thought at times that seemed kind of invasive almost, right? It's like there's three white dudes coming in and we're going to ask you some questions, but we had gained their trust. But what you made me think of by saying that about being one, doing all that yourself, um, I did that TV show on Discovery Channel years ago, that series, it was 10 years ago now, and it was a crew of like, I think it was a crew of 10, and we'd come into some part of like western or eastern Tennessee, and we'd go up to some moonshiner's house, and all of a sudden there's three vehicles, everybody piles out of a vehicle, people are grabbing people's lapels and putting mics on them and plugging them in and telling them to do this, and most people are like, their heads are spinning, like, what's going on, and you don't you just can't build trust that way. And they're there for 8 hours, and then they're gone, and you're like, what just happened? It's like you were totally taken advantage of. And you can see it in the dialogue and in the interactions. They don't really trust you, in the
Yeah.
interviewing, because they're just like, so there's no doubt. And the long period of time, a lot of times we don't have that time, but if you invest that time into a community, then you end up getting what you got, right? Which is
Yeah.
the real deal. And
Right.
when they see it, when they say what you did, like what you're saying with this woman, I don't think it can get any more rewarding, right? Than something like that. That you did not disappoint the people that it was about.
Yeah, I think you're dealing with an area where the people have always been represented by people from outside, even if it was positive representations. And so I didn't realize I was doing something different, but uh, and of course, I mean, I'm somebody from outside, and I was picking and choosing. It's very subjective, but I think to some extent, obviously, they felt like they were reflected in that piece of work in a way that they normally weren't.
Hmm.
And I think, I mean, even now, when we're like so far past the stereotypes, the mid-century stereotypes that we all know from cartoons and films and stuff like that, I, even now, there's all these like microaggressions from coming from mainstream culture towards rural Appalachia, as well as other places too, of course. But
Well, don't you think that the Discovery Channel show Moonshiners, it definitely plays into those stereotypes, right? That's why so many people love it so much, is that it reinforces these stereotypes of kind of this rebellious, kind of goofy, but intelligent, very crafty individual. Granted, I've never seen a whole episode, so I should really be judging. I'm just judging based on what I know about it.
I haven't either, and I judge that show harshly. But lately, because I had this, this my book about Popcorn Sutton come out, I've been thrown into contact with so many moonshiners, fans of the show
Hmm.
lately, as well as people on the show who I've known, who were people who knew Popcorn, and people who I knew who were actually in Mountain Talk and things like that, who've become kind of performers. Um, I don't know why I'm giving quotes. They've become
They
performers.
are, they're called, yeah, they're called talent.
Yeah. So um, I've been rethinking that. I mean, of course I would because of this, but I think that it's sort of like, I don't really have this fully articulated in my brain, but I think it's like a whimsical presentation of culture that it doesn't really appeal to me, but I think there's something valid within it that people are responding to. And so I think it's, even though it's obviously fake and it's obviously this put on kind of reality TV junk, it seems a little silly, but it's still kind of putting up there on the screen something that is a trigger point for people. And if you're talking about moonshine, you're talking about the things that go with that culture and stuff like that. So it's this light-hearted, whimsical way, but something like serious is underneath it that people are responding to. And I guess it's what moonshine represents to people within that culture, which is it's kind of symbolic of this long, storied history of ingenuity and survival and resistance and independence and all of those sort of positive characteristics. So I think there's something that people, positive within it, even though it's not a show that I'm tuning into or looking to see what happens in the next episode. Are they going to get caught this time? I don't know.
Yeah, I feel the same way. So I want to get back to some of these questions. There's a couple of ones here that have more to do with, um, with your experience, kind of, essentially researching moonshine and being in that area for such a long time, knowing the people so well. Some of the questions from students, like there's one here that, judging from the history of moonshine and the fact that it's illegal and it's even life threatening, it's dangerous and all that kind of thing. Um, a lot of people still do it anyway, or did it anyway, right? And why? Their question is, why do you think that so many people continued to take part in moonshining even though it was illegal? And they continue with, is it the love of the alcohol? Is it for the money? Like, what is it? And so I'm
Uh,
kind of curious of what you're thinking of why people do it.
well, why did people build cathedrals and pyramids? When you there's a social control aspect to it, but there really, when you look at those structures, there's no economic incentive that really fully, completely explains their existence. It's this kind of thing that people, well, I'm not going to attempt to explain it myself. I can't. But so I think analogously, it's something like there's no longer any economic incentive for it. I mean, popcorn wasn't the last one, in case that's news, like to anybody. Like he wasn't the last one. But as far as somebody who made their living from it, I can't imagine anybody else is doing that. So maybe he was the last one, or just about in that sense. I think most of the people making moonshine today are probably Kirk might would probably know better than me, but they're probably people who are retired, who always made it on the side. It was part of their family tradition. There is no economic incentive to doing it, and there's, as the questioner points out, I mean, it's a lot of risk. So why do it? And so it's a matter of identity, and I think there's a little bit of like, you can't tell me what I can't do, but it's not just that, because, they're also told not to do lots of things that the same anyway, but no need to go on off on that digression. But so I think it's a matter of identity, and it's a matter of heritage, and who they feel like they are. Um,
I mean, that's what my answer would have been. Is what you said there at the end is that yeah, because there's no economic incentive. I mean, the few people that I know that I interviewed when we were down there doing that moonshine archaeology project, um, one in particular, Mike, he told me, I mean, he really viewed himself. He didn't say these exact words, but the way he would describe it, he was an artist. He was continuing a way of art, and by making his moonshine that his daddy taught him how to do, and his grandfather had taught his daddy how to do, and his daddy's daddy, and go on back, and the same cornstalk, that bloody butcher they've had in the family since they got kicked out of the property of where the Great Smoky Mountain National Park is. I mean, yeah, he's a retired. He gets his some money from. He's a veteran from Vietnam, um, but he's always done it. He's going to continue to do it. He's taught his son how to do it. I mean, it just it's a way to just keep doing something that your family has always done. It's like I think it's analogous to, passing down recipes to, a family member as they, something that the grandma always made, something that your mom always made, something that, that you want to just continue passing on down through the family. Um, and then, yes, there is this rebellious nature to it. It's like, yes, I'm going to keep doing this anyway. I don't care. But you also, I mean, what Mike told me was he makes whoever buys it from him drink it right in front of him, and he watches them. And if they don't like it, if he can tell they don't like it, he doesn't want to sell it to them. And he's like, I only want people that like what I produce. Like it's important. So it's not about the money. It's about bringing joy to people. And
yeah,
so that's another way to think about it because yeah, there's no real economic incentive.
yeah.
Not really.
It invokes their entire history of survival in a
And identity, right? I mean,
yeah.
identity of their individual family and the identity of what it's like being a Western North Carolinian, Carolinian. Um,
And it's possible we see a resurgence. I mean, I think
yeah,
young people are interested in it. I don't know if they're learning from people like Mike and really but gonna reach that level of craftsmanship. But just analogously, what the linguists find, and you see this in other cultural areas as well, is that when, like, so we're talking about a portion of the population that's not the majority anymore, even
right.
though they're kind of signify Appalachian culture, they're disappearing rapidly, and they've been in the minority for 70 years. But um, so we've got, like, right now in Appalachia, like, better highways. They're all the communities are a lot of the communities are turning into bedroom communities for nearby metropolitan areas, or people are moving in, buying summer homes. So the people with roots, like several generations of roots in an area, like Appalachia, like especially Southern Appalachia, they are outnumbered by everybody else. So
Mhm.
what the linguists find is instead of like dialects getting watered down, a lot of times they get strengthened because people are asserting their cultural identity. And so it becomes more self-conscious. And so I think you can look at moonshine in the same way that it was something that everybody did. They did to get by. They did because they had to. They did because dad did, and it was something that economically helped out. And now they're doing it in a way that's self-conscious, but so it could be analogous to that. That it's also a way of asserting their identity.
Yeah.
And so instead of it disappearing because it's no longer relevant, which it isn't, it actually gets more common.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask one more question from the students, but after that, I'm gonna open it up. So there's still about there were last time I checked, there was about 50 people logged in or 40 something. Um, so if you have some questions, get ready. You can chime in and ask Neil a question. But this last question is a little more. Or the last question that was submitted early. I talked about what had happened in the lecture. I talked about with popcorn taking his life. Um, and I know that you two had become close. You did a lot of stuff together. Not just, a lot of people might think it's just the filming of the last one, but you really stayed in touch and did other things together. And they simply asked, kind of, kind of what do you miss him? Essentially, was the question. I mean, like, yeah. I mean, I guess it kind of was a longer question than that, but I'll kind of leave it at that. Kind of if you want to elaborate about what happened and then the loss.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
I like
heavy.
yeah, I like no, I like that question. It's been on my mind lately because, with the book out, I've had the opportunity to talk about it a lot. And then, the topic becomes a kind of an abstraction that's separate from my, you know, friendship and personal relationship with popcorn, even though that's part of the story. I'm beginning to talk about it as a topic, and spending a lot of time talking about the aspect of him that's been remembered as a folk hero, and and not the actual person, which was the purpose of making the book, which to remember who he was, because I saw that disappearing quite rapidly underneath the kind of cultural instinct to immortalize him as a folk hero. He resisted the authorities and to the end, and all this good stuff. Um, so yeah, he took his own life, and that was a shock. The circumstances, you guys, I probably already went over them, but he'd been busted 2007, and then he was on probation when he got busted again, and there were continuances, and he got sentenced to 18 months in a medium security prison, and all this while his health was declining, and so that's part of the context. But the other part of the context that helps to understand the end of his life was that he was comfortable with death, and he talked about it as long as I knew him, and he was always predicting his own death. Like I think in the last one, if you've seen that already, at some point he said when I'm gone, the liquor's gone, and
Hmm.
I'm almost gone. He said in 5 years there won't be no more moonshine liquor, and I'll be dead before then anyway, so it don't matter,
Yeah,
right?
I
So
remember that.
that's wasn't just this offhanded quip. That was the kind of thing he was talking about all the time.
Wow.
And I asked him, I was like, "Why do you think you're not going to be around?" And he's like, he's just like, "You don't know what I don't, you don't know what you don't know," or something. I don't know what he said, but it was something along those lines. Equally, like, mind your own business, kid. Um,
And
but
I'm gonna guess we're talking at least 4 packs a day, right?
probably, yeah.
I mean, it's one after another. It's lighting one off of another. So
He probably slept with him going. I somehow I don't know, but he so and also there's something in the culture, the old Appalachian culture that is that was characteristic of that comfort level with death. Although I think he was a bit of an extreme example. And I was telling somebody this the other day. Like they asked me if it was true. He used to he when he made a little money in kind of the mid 2000s, like he was looking for things to buy it on. Well, what's one thing that everybody's going to need? A coffin. So he buys a coffin and he puts it into his living room. And so people come. Like imagine you come into your friend's house and it's like, oh, there's a shiny coffin. What the hell are you doing? But it was just something he bought. It was like showing off your new car or something, I guess. And so I was telling somebody about this because they asked me if that was true, and I was saying, yeah, the reason they asked was because they knew somebody else who was an old Appalachian guy, a guy who was actually he was a real Appalachian guy, but he was pulled in to be one of the characters in Deliverance, and one of the guys who kind of holds those guys at gunpoint, not the guy who. Anyway, let's
Yeah,
not go
not
into
that guy. The other, not that guy, but the other
not
guy.
that guy,
Okay.
but the other guy. Still not great, but anyway, apparently he was a real character, and the guy that I was talking to, he had gone to visit him, and this man had a coffin set up in his living room, and so I was like, well, there you go. I mean, because the old timers would talk about how if you came across like a really nice shaped stone or a nice big stone or something like that, well, you'd take it home and you'd save that for your own tombstone.
Wow.
So I think that's and so Popcorn's version of that was sort of like a modern version, was buying that coffin several years in advance, just in case, for whenever
Yeah.
it was needed, and putting it in his living room. So, and I don't mean to make, by talking about this and the funny aspects of it, I don't mean to make light of it at all, and I think that everybody probably understands that.
Yeah.
Um, but just to kind of set the context that I feel, and of course, this might be something that I tell myself to makes me more comfortable. But I feel like taking that step was not that difficult for him, and I also feel like that part of him really delighted in getting that letter that he had to report in 10 days to prison and saying, you know what?
I don't
Uh,
have to.
you didn't get me. I'm not going. Yeah, and I'm ready. And so he was looking for the way out and the time to go. And so that's kind of how I see that event. Um,
Yeah,
and
a rebel to the end. You're not going to tell me what to do. I'm
exactly.
in control of this situation. Exactly.
Yeah, and exactly. And so I do like that aspect of it. But of course I miss him and I wish I could talk to him again.
Yeah. Before we go, I got to plug this thing. Okay. Listen, we've been talking about, Neal's brought it up several times.
Mhm.
So listen, this book is the definitive book of Popcorn Sutton. It tells all the stories, not all of them, but I think what Neal was trying to say, or did say, is that you know, after when's the first time you met him? 2001 to
1999.
1999. All of this, um, there's been so much misinformation about who Popcorn was. And I think what Neal has done here is he's tried to really provide some context and some answers to who Popcorn really was from someone who knew him very well, spent a lot of time with him, and played a huge role. I mean, Neal played a huge role into elevating Popcorn to who he is today, with that film. And it's full of great photographs, great stories from Popcorn, great writing from Neal. Anyway, you can go to suckerpunchpictures.com and order a copy. It's beautiful. Anyway, so I recommend it highly. Not recommended for the class or anything because there's no textbook for this class. But if you're into this, you think this story about Popcorn, and you like the film, it's definitely something worth doing. And hey, he might even sign copies of for
Yeah,
students or something when you
absolutely.
maybe put in the comments when you buy it, like, I'm a booze and culture student. So maybe he'll do that. I think I just put him on the spot with that. But
No, I'd be happy to. I'll even slash a little moonshine onto it so that
Yeah.
Even though it'll dry up,
Smell it. You can smell the book, and it'll smell like a new book. That new book smell, kind of like a library, and kind of like moonshine, all mixed together.
yeah.
Um, anything else? Neal, you have any? When we did this before, we did one that we recorded. I asked you right at the end. Um, you know, what suggestions? And this goes back to just filmmaking in general, not necessarily moonshine. But what kind of suggestions would you have to any student that is thinking like, I would like to, like you said, it's so easy to make films now because the not good films, but because the equipment is so cheap and we can do so much of it with our phones. Um, what suggestions would you have for any young budding filmmaker?
Well, just start working, and get your hands. Equipment's easy to find. Um, Pay close attention to the audio because you don't do that at first, um, and then you come to realize that audio is more important in your perception of video quality than the video itself. But so there's a pro tip. But I think I would suspect that most budding filmmakers um, have more questions about how do you break in and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
you figure that out along the way, and everybody's path is different. So if you just start working and don't hesitate, I spent years in hesitation, not knowing what the next step was, and the next step is just to take another step and to see where that leads. So just do that.
Well, Neal, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. Man, I said 30 to 45 minutes. It's been an hour. That's typical for me. Everything takes me longer than I think it's going to. But I think this was really cool that you took the time to do this.
Yeah.
Anyway, so thanks a lot. And just I'll actually see you next week because Neal's coming to State College. So I'll see you next week, man.
Okay. Looking forward to it.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and see you next week on Zoom. Take care.